Tất cả mọi người Việt ở trong nước và tại hải ngoại nên quan tâm đến chính trị. I'm Will Win, also known as Will Wing, and I'm a political activist. I think it's time young Vietnamese started talking more politics. And I figured what better way to start than by teaching you guys the Vietnamese words that we use to describe the events that we went through. I know politics in the Vietnamese community is a very sensitive issue. There's a lot of painful history involved and a lot of unresolved political differences that remain. You know, the fact that there's Vietnamese spread all over the world is a testament to the fact these differences are quite monumental. And even talking about these differences is a sensitive topic. With this channel, I want to create a space for us young Vietnamese to have productive, even-tempered, reasonable discussions about political issues that affect Vietnamese inside the country and around the world. Each video will revolve around a specific political event or theme and will introduce concepts, ideas, and phrases in Vietnamese so that you can have discussions with your family, friends, and fellow Vietnamese about issues that affect us as a community. And what better day to begin than today, April 30th, ngày 30 tháng 4, perhaps the most politically charged date in modern Vietnamese history. Hôm nay là ngày kỷ niệm 45 năm chiến tranh Việt Nam kết thúc. Today we'll cover 10 words that revolve around this event, and I've purposely picked words that'll give you a good general introduction to political Vietnamese vocabulary. So the first word you might have heard me mention a couple of seconds. Okay, let's start over. So our first word is something you might have heard me mention a few seconds earlier. It's the word for the event that brought us all here. Chiến tranh. So chiến tranh is made up of two words. It's made up of chiến, which means battle or war, and tranh, which means contend or strive. Chiến tranh together means war or warfare. So depending on where you are in the world, the Vietnam War has different names. If you're inside the country, occasionally you'll hear the war referred to as chiến tranh chống Mỹ cứu nước. Chiến tranh, the war, chống Mỹ, against America, cứu nước, to save the nation. It's important to note that the name frames the US as the main enemy. North Vietnam saw South Vietnam not as a legitimate and equal enemy, but rather as simply a puppet of the United States. In overseas Vietnamese communities, which are mostly made up of former citizens of South Vietnam, we view South Vietnam with more legitimacy. So when we talk about the Vietnam War, we tend to frame it as a civil struggle between two equal states, North Vietnam and South Vietnam. We use the phrase nội chiến, meaning civil war, nội meaning internal, and chiến meaning war. So chiến tranh happened in Vietnam because of a difference in politics, chính trị. The word chính trị comes from chính, which means government, and trị, which means to rule or administer. So combined together, chính trị means politics, or something political. So the difference in politics had to do with whether Vietnam would be a communist or a capitalist nation. On July 20th, 1954, Vietnam was divided in two at the 17th parallel. Below the 17th parallel, you had South Vietnam, known officially as the Republic of Vietnam, Việt Nam Cộng Hòa. Now, republic here is made up of two words, Cộng, meaning common, and Hòa, meaning peace or harmony. So the word Cộng Hòa means republic or republican. South Vietnam tried to be a multi-party democracy. The problem was, it was also fighting a war. So there were definitely periods in South Vietnam's history where authoritarian governments took over. Nonetheless, the country was guided by Republican ideals like freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, which is why we refer to the South Vietnamese side as Bên Cộng Hòa, or the Republican side. North of the 17th parallel, you had North Vietnam, or as it was officially known, Việt Nam Dân Chủ Cộng Hòa, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Here, Dân Chủ is the part that represents democracy. Dân means people, Chủ means master or lord or ruler. So the word Dân Chủ literally means the people are the masters. Now ironically, North Vietnam was ruled over by only one party. It was an authoritarian state guided by the Vietnamese Communist Party. In Vietnamese, the word for communist is Cộng sản. Now Cộng here means common, and sản means production or resources. So the word Cộng sản literally means common production or common resources, communist. And because of this, we often refer to North Vietnam and the current Vietnamese government, which is an extension of North Vietnam, as Bên Cộng sản, or the communist side. Long story short, 45 years ago today, the communists defeated the Republicans. Communist tanks from both North Vietnam and communist insurgents from within the South took over the southern capital of Saigon. Inside the country, it's known as the liberation of Saigon. Ngày Sài Gòn giải phóng. Here, giải means to separate or untie, and phóng means to release or set free. Giải phóng, liberate or liberation. For those overseas Vietnamese in the US, Europe, and Australia who call it the fall of Saigon, April 30th is remembered in more somber terms. We call it Ngày Quốc hạnh, the Day of National Shame. Quốc means country or nation, and hạnh means resentment or shame. So Ngày Quốc hạnh means a day of national resentment, or the day of national shame. And here's a big reason why it's a day of national shame for a lot of Southern Vietnamese. I want to play for you guys one of the most historically significant recordings of that era, the surrender address of the last president of South Vietnam, Nguyen Van Minh. In the recording, he declares the dissolution of the state.
Đại tướng Nguyen Van Minh, tổng thống chính quyền Sài Gòn, tuyên gọi chiến dịch Cộng hòa hạ quyết chiến đầu hàng trong lực lượng tuyên bố khối miền Nam Việt Nam. Tôi tuyên bố chính quyền Sài Gòn từ Trung ương đến địa phương phải giải phóng hoàn toàn đường lối chủ trương của chúng tôi là hòa giải và hòa hợp dân tộc để cứu sinh mạng đồng bào. Tôi tin tưởng sâu xa vào sự hòa giải giữa người Việt Nam.
You might have seen in the second half of that clip that there were a couple words bolded: reconcile, reconciliation, and people. These are the last two words I'll cover today. Reconcile or reconciliation in Vietnamese is hòa giải. Hòa meaning peace or harmony, and giải meaning resolve or solve. So hòa giải means reconcile or reconciliation. The word for people is dân tộc. Dân as in people, we saw that in dân chủ earlier. And tộc meaning clan or family. So the word dân tộc means ethnic group, nation or nationality. In his last message to the Vietnamese people, President Nguyen Van Minh expressed hope that people from North and South move forward as a single united people. Hòa giải dân tộc. Unfortunately, his wish has yet to come true. What ended up happening after April 30th was hundreds of thousands of Southern Vietnamese who had worked for the former government or who had served in the armed forces in any way were severely punished. Many were sent to re-education camps for years at a time, some for more than a decade. Others were blacklisted by the new communist government completely from finding any kind of livelihoods for themselves or their families. In these dire circumstances, hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese fled the country by boat in search of a better future. And it's these hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese who fled overseas that seeded the diaspora community we have all over the world today. So was April 30th a liberation or an invasion? I would encourage you to talk to fellow Vietnamese about it. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, especially those who lived through the war. Talk to Vietnamese overseas and inside the country. And hey, throw in the vocabulary that you're learning from me. One thing all Vietnamese can agree on is that April 30th was the day the war ended. It was the day peace arrived in Vietnam. In Vietnamese, the word for peace is hòa bình. Hòa meaning peace or harmony, and bình meaning level, smooth, or even. Maybe one day in the future, when we've resolved our differences, instead of using divisive terms like Ngày Quốc hạnh or Ngày giải phóng, we could use Ngày hòa bình, the day peace arrived. Alright, so that's a wrap on the first video for the Political Vietnamese channel. Subscribe and comment below with suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. If there are any improvements that you think we can make, please do feel free to express those as well. I know politics can be really intimidating, especially in the Vietnamese context. Politics involves becoming comfortable with conflict and learning how to resolve issues in a meaningful way. It's my hope that by introducing you to political vocabulary in Vietnamese, you can begin taking those first steps to connect with the past, ground yourself in the present, and maybe, just maybe, fight injustice in the future.